Grady Powell, host of Forged in Fire.
Kyle Mann.
I'm Jay Warner Wallace.
Kira Davis.
It's Ben Adams.
Hey, this is Dave Baker.
Carrie Pomeroli.
This is Mike Reiner.
This is Ethan Nicole.
This is Leanne Morgan.
It's Dan Parker. This is GP. And this is why you should never.
Never.
How I got suckered in.
I'm so embarrassed that I'm here.
You're wasting your time. You got better things to do.
Never listen.
Those darling, yummy Reverend and the Reprobate.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Reverend and the Reprobate live from Dallas Fan Expo. My name is Lucas Pinkert. I'm an actual Reverend, and here with me as always is a man who turned 21 in prison doing life without parole.
Yeah.
It's the big man, Dan Gibson. What's going on, stud?
What's up, buddy?
This is a weird experience. It's new, and we're following up the guys from Friday Night Tights, which they've got this incredible. It's Bernoulli's effect, is what it's called. Like whenever wind blows through a thing and it sucks things together, right? Mm-hmm. And then when the wind stops blowing, everything departs, and that's what happened. They came, they put on an amazing show, and now we're going to do a Q&A with our wives for 45 minutes.
Isn't there a noodle that's a Bernoulli noodles?
I think it's Bernoulli because they do the Alfredo, like the pasta sauce and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's it.
Which is pregnancy safe.
All right.
Yeah, that's really good
we
news
are
for
live
us.
at the Fan Expo.
Dallas Fan Expo.
Recording live.
Yep. A quick shout out to a couple of our friends who have helped us out this week. First to Ashley Cox.
Yep, Splashly.
Yep, who gave us our cosplay all day gear. Big thanks to Ashley for supplying that for us. And to our friends over at the Tatooine Sons podcast, with Screen Rant ranked as the number 2 best podcast for Star Wars content, for helping us with a little bit, creating some questions, and then giving us some recording advice as we've been talking to some people on the expo floor. So you got here yesterday. You were setting things up, and now that we're here at the expo and we're on they can't do anything to us now.
If you call setting up.
So Danley,
you just want to skip past
you
all this.
walked into the place, right? Because we had to pick up our will call tickets, our passes, and all that. You came in.
Yep.
And then you immediately decided to sneak onto the expo floor.
I decided to see how far our programming passes could take us, and the answer is far.
Pretty far?
Pretty far.
It's been really great, except
This
for
is something I should be saying.
Yeah,
but
yeah. So like we've
I don't
been
think
able
Taj
to,
Shin is here.
No.
Yeah,
she's not here. So as we've gone from place to place, we're doing the Led Zeppelin thing. We're going in through the outdoor. Like other people, it's their exits. Like, no, we have we have this programming pass. Well, we had this really awkward moment where our wives are behind us.
Programming reprobate.
Your son is with us.
Yeah.
And they try to stop him.
Yeah.
And I
They say,
immediately
"Y'all are fine."
Yeah, they
Who
were
are
like,
you?
"What? You can't come in here." And I immediately said, "No, he's our kid." And then I realized that our wives aren't anywhere close to us at all.
No.
And it's just two guys in
with
cosplay
matching
shirts,
passes, one that says Reverend and one Reprobate,
and their kid. So
yeah,
it was a really awkward.
It was
moment
a great decision when we decided to adopt him.
I looked at our son and was like, "You look nothing like me. You can take completely after your dad." It's very sad.
He's the show's son.
He is. He's the show's. Well, unless we have a boy.
Yeah, that's
true.
And
then we'll see.
As long as I get some kind of rights in this, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
we're waiting on
it. So we wanted to address something. We had a lot of amazing podcasts that have been here today. Make sure you check out the Dallas Fan Expo schedule so that you can see who's been in and
there's
out.
Been some great
There's
stuff.
Been some
I was
incredible
taking
stuff.
notes from a bunch of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Some incredible, not just, I hate to use the word influencers.
Yeah.
Because it feels so chic and just awful. But a lot of amazing podcasters have been here. They were here Friday, Saturday, and then there's going to be some others tomorrow. So if you're watching this live and you want to check out some of the stuff that's happening tomorrow at Fan Expo and see some of the podcasters, they've got a great lineup for tomorrow. Several of them have talked about how to grow a following. Several of them have talked about, how do you ignore the haters that are on the internet and the people that you encounter that are just really difficult whenever you feel like, you've poured your heart and soul into this product that you're putting out, and now people are telling you not only that you're ugly and you're fat and you suck, but on top of all of that, you start to internalize some of this stuff and take it personally. Well, we were looking at the things in our podcasting network groups and in the groups of friends that we have that podcast, and one question continues to come up, and that is, what do you have to do in order to book a good guest on your show? Because when we started our show out, it was the worst thing that's ever been put on the internet. It's absolutely terrible. I think our first stories were us.
We've been trying to do better. And we will probably continue
We've put
to
the
try.
same minimal amount of effort into, but like that, it's like compound effort. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, we put a little bit into this one, a little bit into this one. It's kind of grown.
It makes the next one after that a little better.
Yeah, but we didn't really have an identity as a show whenever we first started.
But guess is something we both agreed on pretty quickly. Is,
Yeah.
Hey, if there's anyone that we both really want to talk to, if we can make our show about that,
It would be great.
it would be a ton of fun. And so
Because
that's
we
what
were
we've done.
already robbing all of their bits, right? Like when we when we first started, there were podcasts that we listened to, and the podcast
We
would
didn't
have
get
some.
Norm Macdonald on because he passed.
Yeah, that
and
was
because he was, I mean.
No, I
just
thought you meant he
the
passed on our
greatest.
show whenever we asked him. He's like, never
was
mind,
like,
next time.
No.
So when we first started, we were just stealing bits because we had heard a friend of ours a guy who's become a friend of ours who's in the Texas Radio Hall
Hey,
of Fame.
a nice lady just walked by and smiled at us.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
You could come listen, but she won't. So there is. But we literally tell our guests to tell people this is why I never listen to the Reverend and the Reprobate. That said, I keep banging the table.
Getting guests.
Yeah, that said, when we were looking at the way that our show was going to be formatted, we had stolen so many things from other shows. And some of those things were really great that we took, and others of them were things that worked really well for the show that we'd listened to, but not for ours. One in particular was the Babylon Bee, right? They did, I forget what the name of their segment was, but like, here's cool stuff or whatever. And we basically stole it and used a line from,
Good, not
from
good.
Brack.
Cool, not cool, whatever.
Yeah, we used a line from the Brack show with like, here's some stuff that I like. And that was a segment that we did, and we did it for a little while. It was kind of fun, but it became the same thing over and over. I would talk about a Star Wars book, which you would say that you hated reading, and then you would talk about some dumb movie that I didn't like, and that's what it basically turned into.
I would talk about the Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah, who are here
that
this weekend.
My wife and I got to see.
Yeah.
That I love. My kid can't watch it, and probably no one else should either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and I think we're actually going to be hanging out with your kids so that you and your wife might be able to see their thing.
We're going to go to the double wide bar in Dallas and hang out. No, this is.
Yeah.
I'm actually. What is it? Yeah. Not actually going to go, but
Right, so-
I am very tempted.
But there were so many of those things that we'd stolen from other shows, and what we decided to do was, why don't we talk to those guys that are like killing it, that are getting
Ones that are-
thousands and thousands of downloads every week and every month. What can we do to not just allow
whatever your
ourselves a larger
motivation-
audience, but
whatever your
also-
motivation, if it is getting views or if it's just someone amazing you want to talk to, how do you get a hold of them?
Right, and this was what transitioned our show from being just what is it? The average podcast is just two libertarian bros talking to each other, high fiving. Like we didn't want to, we didn't want to be that. So what we essentially did is we were like, what can we do? And we decided that and the tagline for our show is that two best buds talking to people that they have no business talking to. So
I think that still sums it up well.
Yeah, and the number one question that we get from other people that listen to our podcast is, how do you get the guests on that you have on? We've had top tier comedians like Leanne Morgan, like Jeff Allen.
I actually have a list. Would you like me to go through some of the real
go
quick
through
ones?
some of our best guests.
I'm trying to make this topical as much as I could
but
for
only
the Fan Expo.
As you go through this list, I'll tell you whether or not they were actually a good guest. This will be some behind the scenes
This sounds
stuff.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Tiffany Vollmer.
Tiffany Vollmer is great.
Does the voice of Bulma for
Mhm.
Dragon Ball Z.
Yep.
David Baker, Mike Reiner, Ticket legendary radio host.
Okay, so we should
and locally in
we
Dallas.
should say who David Baker is. Both David Baker, Ben Abbott are judges on the show Forged in Fire on the History Channel. Yep. Not just historic weapons recreation specialist, but David Baker also worked with a lot of the prop guys that do stuff for the Star Wars series. He worked on Zorro.
Legion, the movie Legion.
He did Legion with Paul Bettany.
The weapon that Paul Bettany shows up with, he made it.
He
made
designed
it for him
that,
in
and
his
it's like this crazy thing. He was also in Aaliyah's face at the Missy Elliott's
Missy
face
Elliott,
during the tribute to Aaliyah at the VH1 Music Awards. So it was.
So all of the Forged in Fire people, the hosts,
all of them have
the
come.
three judges that are on there the most.
Right. Yep. So we've had those guys that have been on the show. Who else you got? We got Mike Reiner, who we mentioned before.
David Gant is, I still think, the funniest one of all time to me.
Okay,
Just his situation.
So I had a conversation about this last night, actually. we host a Bible study at our house, and one of the students, I say one of the students, he's a man now, he's 25. One of the guys was talking to us about, like, he was like, have you seen the movie Masterminds? Masterminds is like my favorite movie in the world. It's the dumbest thing, and I like want to recreate this photo shoot.
It's a real story that
I was
it's
like,
based
yeah.
on.
So we had that guy, the biggest bank robber in U.S. history, on our show to tell the story about how he walked
stole
into a vault.
$17+ million.
Loaded
all
up
by
$17
himself.
million, drove it out, and then put $30,000 in his pants and flew to Mexico. It's just the absolute most absurd thing that we could ever think of. But
I still remember when I was leaving the house and I told my wife, I'm going to go interview a bank robber. And I just fell down on the floor laughing. Just how absurd this was.
It's absolutely absurd. And going through, like, thinking about all of the questions that we had for him, and then finding out in the weeks leading up to the interview that he had a book called The Book of Dave. Like he was like it's some sort of scholar, like religious book.
What I've learned as a bank robber on the run from the FBI
and in prison. And my favorite chapter in the whole book was "Be Your Own 4th of July."
Yeah. That's
so
great.
yeah,
but yeah, a whole bunch. Leanne Morgan, comedian, the Hook GP, Graham Parker.
Yeah, from Scotland. He's got over
Tom
a million.
Leopold wrote for Cheers and Seinfeld.
Yep,
a whole bunch. An abnormal amount of people, I think, that would want to talk to two schmucks.
Yeah, and most recently, and his episode will be airing here in the next few weeks, is Lynn Yulee, who wrote on X-Men, the original cartoon version of X-Men from the early 90s. He also wrote everything on Ben 10. He wrote for all three of the Ben 10 series. He wrote Static Shock. And
I love Static Shock.
Yeah, he wrote several things in the Batman animated series, but not the original one with Kevin Conroy, but later in some of the Batman animated stuff. Like, the guy is just this fountain of info and really a comic book animation historian, because he also wrote for the Avengers and for Thor and for the Iron Man comics. For the Iron Man comic book.
So we've
animated
got,
series.
So we've
like
got
this incredible list.
So we've got like 80 episodes banked on at least on YouTube.
Yeah.
And we do get the question a lot: how do you get guests?
Yeah, because
for a
we're
podcast. If you're starting out, which we were,
we're schmucks. If I can use a Yiddish word.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we do get that question a lot. So
Yeah.
that's something I think that we wanted to share, put on tape is what's worked for us, because we've gotten some people
been
that
crazy.
we didn't deserve to talk to, which is the tagline on our show.
And so the primary thing that we have found is these really short, incredibly short emails that are very informal tend to be the thing that really brings people in. And this has worked for everyone, because we produce a lot of other shows as well, and this has worked for everyone across the board.
So let's improv real quick. If we were trying to contact Robert Downey Jr. and we had his email, and it was
how do we end up with Robert Downey
and it was
Jr.'s email?
rdj@gmail.com, because he got it early.
Oh yeah, he got it. He was like the second guy on Gmail.
RDJ rocks at Gmail.
Yeah, he knows Mr. Google and was like, Mr. Google, I need this. Okay.
So how would we word a contact email? Because part of it is you got to get some kind of contact with them, whether it's over Facebook, which has worked.
Sure.
Email typically works pretty well, but
so what
does an informal email look like?
Yeah, so it for us starts with a headline or a subject line, right? And the subject line says podcast interview with a question mark. Really direct, super easy. We've talked about guys like Gary Vee have said the subject of your email needs to tell me everything I need to know about this email before opening it. Like, it needs to give me enough information to know whether or not this email is worth me opening at all. And so podcast interview question mark, and then that's all you do in the subject line.
I emailed our HR rep Friday.
Okay.
Because there was dumb. It was asking.
It was telling
your
me
new
HR rep at your new job.
Yeah, it's been telling me there's 12 people on my team that have never identified as a race. So I'm just sitting here waiting, like, for them to either do it or it to stop informing me about it. So I said, how do I get this to stop informing me? It's up to them to say something, right?
Right.
I said, yeah. So the email was just Paycom dumb. And I just had a picture, like, what do I do here?
And she figured it out.
She said immediately, I loved the title of the subject.
Yeah, there you go.
It was direct.
So the subject should tell you everything you need to know about what is in the body of the email, to whether or not you even want to open it up. So we just start with podcast interview question mark.
Shout out to Kimberly.
Yeah. And then in the body of the email, you keep it 3 lines. Hey, whoever you want to talk to, I have a podcast.
And by the way, not Mr. Junior.
Yeah, like don't the formal
Mr. Downey
stuff.
Jr.
The formal stuff does not work, and consistently we've seen that. Whether it is with people that are, super high intellectual, like business people, or whether it's the folks that are like on our level of we're just absolute doofuses. Like if no matter what you think of a person and whether or not they're going to look at it, if you started with a formal intro with, hi, Mr. So-and-so, they're going to dismiss it immediately. So we start all of our emails. We would be like, hey, Robert, super informal. Nobody calls him that, right? Like maybe his mom.
Bobby. They call him Bobby.
Yeah, hey, Bobby. But it would be, that makes me think of King of the Hill. We're going to have to write the whole
Dang
email
it,
in
Bobby
Hank's
Jr.
voice. Yeah, but we would just put, hey, Robert, and then the next couple of lines are, we've got a podcast. We think you'd be a great fit. Are you interested in coming on? And boom, done.
Yeah.
And then you sit and wait. And there's a follow-up process. But that first email being that simple is what typically gets us the best response. And it doesn't matter if you are recording your podcast.
Hey, you guys, there's
on an
chairs in
iPhone.
here.
It doesn't matter if you are recording your podcast on an iPhone. It doesn't matter if you're recording your podcasts, in a professional podcasting studio. If you have those elements to it, right, a really direct subject line, and then you're talking to them about what it is that you want from them. We just want you to come on our podcast for an interview. That's enough for them to figure out whether or not they want to be on the show. And they really don't care at that point what platform you're on, who your audience is, how big your audience is. If you give them those things, the reply rate on it, from our experience, is about 80%, because they don't want to read a novel. They don't need to know why you want them on. If you think they're interesting enough for an interview, most people are like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So now what's our next step when we don't get a reply? Because this is the part that I'm the worst at, and you actually do pretty good at.
Well, typically I forget, and then I go check,
Right.
and then a couple of weeks later you send them a follow-up. I mean, that's pretty standard in the business world, is follow-up. I've been creative. I don't have a great example, so I'm going to probably stop here. But
I'm thinking like the best one for us, I think, when it came to follow-up emails was Seth Dillon from the Babylon Bee. So Seth Dillon's the CEO of the Babylon Bee. The way that we ended up getting in touch with him was with our follow-up email. We use a system. It's free. It's called Trello, that does like some business organization stuff.
Trello.
Yeah. And we just put a little alarm on it so that after 3 days we email them back. The email's simple. Hey, just want to circle back to this. Would love to have you on if you're interested. And then send it. And it was the second email that actually got us Seth Dillon. Now with Seth Dillon, we did a really unique thing, and that has served us really well. And that is that at the end of our interview with Seth, we asked him, because at this point the Babylon Bee had like 250 episodes of their podcasts, because they had several that they had out. We just asked Seth, we're like, hey, so you've been on the show, you've been a guest. Who do you think would be a great guest for our show? And he gave us a list of people that we can just drop his name with, and that he would be happy to put us in touch with.
Yep.
Which leads me to the third thing is you got to have enough guts to reach out to him, because there's several people on this list that, we freaked out whenever they first contacted us, or we didn't want to, feel like we were intruding, because we're like, they've got so much stuff going on. We don't really want to bother them or bog them down with stuff, but you got to leap and do it anyway.
I think one thing that a lot of people in our chosen hobby field deal with is the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you feel like no one's going to care about what I say, or I've got nothing interesting to share.
Right.
Joseph Carter, the Mink Man, who I've been obsessed with for 10 years, doesn't want to talk to me. And that was my case. The Mink Man.
We got it.
Almost fell down. The Mink Man. I had his number for months.
Right.
He'd given it to me, and you kept asking, where are we at? I was like, I hadn't done anything, because I was
you didn't wanna
terrified
call
to
him.
reach out to him.
Right.
Because the fear of rejection and being found out as an imposter, over positioned my want to interview him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that adds up a little bit.
Sure.
But I ended up getting over that, maybe because of you. You may have called him.
Because I just, I think I did. I think I grabbed your phone and called him one
And for
day.
those that don't know about the Mink Man, let me tell you a little bit about him.
Yeah, what's the 30-second version of the Mink Man?
Oh, yeah. No, this will be 20 seconds.
Oh.
So if you have a farm, you have options to keep pests out. You can poison them, or you can call the Mink Man and his service animals of mink. How am I doing? Predators that come in and will clear out a bunch of rats in one afternoon.
Yeah, like 300 or 400.
Doing it in a natural way with predators.
Yeah, and it's a crazy to watch his YouTube channel.
No, you're continuing talking, and I'm done.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah, it's crazy to watch his YouTube channel, and he was a big one for us. David Baker was another guy. We had his number for a long time.
Yeah.
David
Baker, the judge from Forged in Fire. He makes weapons.
He replied immediately within, I want to say within like 5 minutes. He replied to our Facebook
with
message his cell phone number.
This is the other thing is if you have a podcast or if you're thinking of starting one, almost everyone has replied of, oh yeah, I've been wanting to do this. Like either people aren't reaching out or we have just had an amazing amount of success in that one regard.
Yeah, maybe at both ends. But like as soon as Dave sent me his number, I was geeking out, and then I called it, and as soon as he answered the phone, it was like, hey, this is David Baker. I was like, remember how you were, like, I went into the total like Chris Farley thing. Remember how you're a judge on Forged in Fire? And he's like, yeah, who is this? I was like, hi, I sent you a message.
I like your swords.
I sent you a message. I think you're cool. He's like, great. So do you have a point to this? I was like, oh, yeah, right. So we want you to be on the podcast. And it's gone there. So that's the primary thing that we get asked. How do you get guests on? And that's really the process. You send an initial email that's only like 3 lines long, hit them back in a couple of days, and then follow up at the 5th day. And if after 5 days they haven't replied to you, just say, hey, you know what? If you don't want to come on the show, like, we still love your work. Maybe we'll hit you back in a few months or in a year or something like that. And then just schedule that out. And a lot of people we've gotten,
and that,
6 months down the road, they're like,
friends
hey,
with the other judges and now the host, Grady Powell.
And some of those people that you feel like maybe blowing you off that say, you know what? We're super busy right now. Check back with us in 3 months. When you check back with them, there's a lot of times that as long as you're doing it in that same email thread, they end up coming on the show, which is a pretty cool thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing we get asked the most about is the segment that we end all of our shows with, which is a segment that we called Controlled Rowdiness. And this came from a buddy of ours who is a New York Times bestselling author, a guy named Stephen Mansfield. He writes a lot of books on leadership, and one of the things that he says teams really need in order to be built properly is that there has to be a certain amount of like controlled rowdiness within that group. Like there has to be some camaraderie. You've got to be able to have good senses of humor, and everybody needs to be able to be honest with one another about things, even if it is not, let's say, necessarily the truth that we want to hear in a way that might not be the most sensitive to our feelings. But he refers to this as controlled rowdiness. And so we decided we would take that type of approach for the last like 10 minutes with our guests, right? So let's say we had on, I don't know, one of the guys from Friday Night Tights, right? Like if we were going to have on one of the guys from Friday Night Tights.
Who would it be?
I think Quarter Black Garrett might be one of the guys from Friday Night Tights that we would want to have on.
I've been watching him for a while.
Right. So if we were going to just come up and riff on some questions that we would ask for Quarter Black Garrett, what would some of those things be? Like if you came up with.
Does he think that Ray Charles can see?
Yeah. Are Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder really unable to see? Because there's a lot of videos that are out there of Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder's catching boom stance. Yeah. So we start with these really ridiculous premises and then pare things down, right? Like,
if your life was a Hallmark movie, what would it be titled?
Yeah, what city would it take place in?
Well,
he doesn't know as he's like slowly walking away. Yeah, why?
Compton.
It would take place in Compton. That would make sense. Yeah. Which one of your grandparents is your favorite? And then, so there's a lot of riffing and things that happen. So many of those questions, though, start off as things that are completely in left field with an intent to bring it to something else. One of the ones that we consistently ask people, because there has to be a way in order to engage your interviewee or the person you're interviewing creatively. Especially like when we talked with Len Yulee, who is the writer for X-Men and Batman and for Ben 10 and Static Shock. When we're talking to him, we want to get his creative juices flowing. So like, how do we do that? And what we want to get out of them in this particular segment is ridiculous and funny content. So the idea was, if we want them to tell them, like, we want your best story or your most embarrassing story or the funniest story you have, right? Like, what's the story that you tell people at parties? So we can ask it in that way, like, okay, what's the story that you tell people at parties, which is pretty boring, right? But how can you make that question interesting? And so after a few minutes of us going back and forth, the scenario now is aliens have landed and they've abducted you. You're the representative for Earth. You have 60 seconds to tell them a story that's so good that the world isn't destroyed. Half of our guests completely fall apart from the pressure of this like ridiculous
which
hypothetical.
Is also funny.
Yeah, which is great. And then we time them, and then if the world ends, then the world ends. But most of the time, they come up with something that's really entertaining, or they tell, quote unquote, like that story. The story that is their most embarrassing, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of Dominic Doan, who was on our show recently, told a story about whenever his grandma was getting scammed, that a scammer called his grandma and said that, he was Dominic and was in jail in Quebec in Canada, that he'd gotten drunk after a wedding and he needed to be wired $3,000. And his very religious mother was called by his grandmother, and she immediately put him on the prayer list and is like trying to get a hold of him and trying to get in touch with him. And he's like, okay, well, hours later, he's able to get to his phone and respond. And he was like, well, thanks, Mom. Like, first off, though, like, why did you believe I was drunk and imprisoned in the middle of Canada? Like, I'm doing something in California, and you know that. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. Also, I need to call every church that I've called and have you added to the prayer list and like take you off. So there were these kind of stories that were really great. But a lot of them, when we come up with these absurd questions, have to do with really specific things in a person's, I guess, area of expertise, right? And I want you to tell kind of the story of how we came up with some of these questions most recently, right? So we had Ian Allison, who is he's an incredible bass player. He's played with Corey Wong, with Eric Hutchinson. He works right now with a group called Scott's Bass Lessons, and he has developed a way to make the actual like the stand-up bass and the electric bass sound like bass synths. Mm-hmm. And so he's like world renowned for this. But he's also a Star Wars fan. And I think we might have some Star Wars fans that are here at the Expo today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ahsoka.
And we know for a fact that Ethan listens only to like Ian listens only to the old man curmudgeon Star Wars things. Like, he hates everything other than the original trilogy, but he's got daughters that love it, so he watches all of it. And then he privately comes back and complains to his wife about how awful absolutely everything is. And so we were like, okay, we know this about Ian. How can we take him and basically use this as like a trap question during our interview? Mm-hmm. And what we did is we knew the thing that he hated the most was the way that the Grand Inquisitor looked. Well, is everybody here caught up with Kenobi? Because I don't want to spoil anything. Everybody seen episid 5? No?
I actually haven't either.
Chuck? Yeah, you'll mute yourself. You got to turn your headphones off. Gosh, Chuck. So the Grand Inquisitor does not look at all like he does in the show.
Yeah, there was a lot of Twitter conversations going on.
Oh,
about that
for
too.
sure, right? Because like as soon as we saw the Grand Inquisitor, like in the Rebels, the show, he looks like Jason Isaacs got John Kerry's face blue painted onto him. Like it's just this big, long face, and it's this
John
really
Kerry's
it's a throwback. So like it's this huge long
Nobody
face.
here
It's really
except for that guy
intimidating. Yeah.
knows.
And in the show Rebels, it's great. The guy that and this is nothing against that guy, but the guy that plays it in Obi-Wan, he does not have that same face.
Uh-huh.
His face is more like what you would expect as a mall Santa if the beard was taken off of him.
Yep.
And so we knew this about Ian. Everything in the show had been about music thus far. And so what we did is we basically
hit him
baited
with
in a
it.
trap question.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, hey, you know what? You're an incredible bass player. So what do you think about the fact that the Grand Inquisitor doesn't look anything like the Grand Inquisitor should in the show? And he went on like a 4 or 5 minute rant about how terrible it was, only to come back and say, but my daughter really loves it, and so I'm not going to say anything negative about it.
We called him off sides on that.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things when
we drew him off sides.
Yeah. When you're looking at creating questions for your guests, one of the biggest things you have to do is you have to make a question interesting for them to answer.
We also asked him what is better to pick up chicks, electric stand up or key bass?
Yeah, the John Tesh keytar. and he went with that because Tesh was on Entertainment Tonight.
The correct answer is no basses can be used to pick up chicks.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's only when I stopped playing bass that I was able to get married because my wife was like, "Oh, you put that thing down. You're actually you're not so bad looking.
You're able to move forward."
So there's all of these tricks that basically we use whenever we ask questions specifically in that segment in order to create an environment where the interviewee.
They feel comfortable to play.
Yeah, is comfortable to play in. Ben Abbott lately, then this has kind of been one of the favorite posts on Instagram. We asked Ben Abbott, based on just the weirdness of conversations that we were having. So Ben Abbott creates swords. He's a swordsmith. He's a judge on a show called Forged in Fire. Like, to buy one of Ben Abbott's kitchen knives.
Not only is he a judge, he's an undefeated champion.
Yeah. So, but to buy one of his kitchen knives, a kitchen knife from Ben Abbott is like $10,000. It's a ridiculous amount of money for a singular kitchen knife. We don't want to know anything about the forge. We don't want to know anything about the kitchen knives. We got on this weird thing about, because I forget, we were eating Sour Patch Kids or something like that. What would you make? And I want to just make sure we frame the question.
This is the dumbest question. I'm
properly.
sorry that we're sharing this.
Right. But we asked him,
it's very
we're like, so
funny to me.
a very sassy pirate has asked you to make an edible sheath for his scimitar. Like, what flavor do you make it? And the whole question ends up being like this 3 or 4 minute long thing where it
It's a
blows
ridiculous
up
question
for
that we're
him.
hoping that he asks.
Yeah, and so the premise
answers.
now becomes the punchline for not just that, but also for creating.
And his answer was rum raisin.
Yeah, which is the best answer. That
the
or
correct answer.
It was either rum raisin or going to be appletini. Like, those were the two I think that were on the board, and that's what he ran with. So when we are looking at some of these questions, I'm going to pull up our lightning question thing. You are typically the one of the two of us that comes up with the premises, and then I kind of help hone and whittle them down.
Like, I just write everything I can think of and hope that a third of them make sense.
Okay. So this is the no idea is a bad idea.
Yep,
And we've learned
yep.
this from several of the comedians that we've worked
Yeah,
with.
when brainstorming, when building something, no idea is a bad idea. You can always hone it. You can always get someone else to look at it, make it better. But you just write it all down.
And most of it, if you go back and look at it, is terrible. Like,
Yeah.
just absolutely
All right, so where are you going with this? What questions do you have?
So as I'm looking at these, it's the ones that we came up with early on in the show that we've used over and over is the alien stuff, right? Like, if aliens came, we've talked about that question. But a lot of the stuff that we started with was really, really ridiculous and didn't have anything to do with anything that we were talking about. So your permanent vacation home, volcano, or a marinara trench, like, that just doesn't make any sense. But all of those things, like, the ridiculousness of it gets honed down and can be paired into something that's interesting for people to listen to, and it makes it interesting for the person that you're interviewing. And that's the key. Once you've made a question interesting for the person you're interviewing, for the guest, right? Now they want other people to come on the show. And this has been where we've built the majority of our relationships. Going back to that first question, like, how do you get guests on the show?
You keep getting good guests.
You
How
make
are you
it
doing
fun
that?
for the guests that are there.
Yep.
Right? So, like, the sheath question for Ben Abbott was great. The one for Ian Allison was really great for him because he wanted to rail on the Grand Inquisitor, but knew he couldn't do it on his Twitter account because he would get too
We
much
said to
hate.
give him a safe place to go,
Right.
wank on that.
Yeah, to go talk about that. And then
I love that word.
And then now they want their friends to be on the show because they've enjoyed it. So that worked the best with David Baker. David Baker is the historic weapons recreation specialist. He's done a ton of stuff. Like we said before, he worked on the VH1 tribute to Aaliyah. He was actually in Missy Elliott's head. He created that head, the giant animatronic head that came down and shot smoke and all that. He was in it, controlling it. And he's worked as a prop master, not just on a bunch of plays. He danced in Grease 2 and like all of this stuff. But since he had fun on the show, he starts sending us the contact information for his friends. So not just the other judges of Forged in Fire, but he had such a good time that he scheduled a time for all of them to come on together. When we interviewed Seth Dillon, that opened up the door for us to interview Ethan Nicole, who is the creator of Axe Cop, which was an FX show where the main character, Axe Cop, was voiced by Nick Offerman.
And you've had a man crush on him for a long time for his
and Ethan
illustrations.
Nicole? Oh, absolutely. So Axe Cop is a thing it's a comic book that he created with his little brother. Like him and his little brother are almost 20 years apart.
I was telling a friend about this the other day.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating story.
Yeah, him and his little brother are nearly 20 years apart. He needed a way for them to bond, and so he would go and like play with action figures with his little brother, and anything his little brother said, they would then illustrate. So Axe Cop is hilarious, but it's also extremely violent. Because when you're a 5-year-old boy
His
playing with
sidekick
action figures,
is a T-Rex with machine gun arms.
Yeah,
But
but
it's definitely something a 5-year-old would come up with.
right, and when you're a 5-year-old that is, playing with action figures, of course they have to chop each other's heads off. Like that's how you do it. What did he do? Oh, he chopped his head off. Well, it doesn't get that
How
way.
else do you kill a bad guy?
Right. But then when you if you're a cop with an axe, there's only one thing that you got to do, right?
Yeah.
But when you take that and you illustrate it, now it becomes this very different thing that the 5-year-old shouldn't watch or look at.
Yeah.
And yet, like, it became this huge phenomenon. So we got to talk to Ethan about that because of, that door that was open for that. Another guy that we got to talk to was Doug Tenaple. And I know if you've ever played Earthworm Jim or if you enjoyed Cat Scratch on Nickelodeon, he was the showrunner for Cat Scratch for a long time. Like, that's his creation. The Neverhood video games are all his. And Doug is a powerhouse in the comic and the illustration industry whenever it comes to all of this stuff. I mean, Doug's panels at the cons that he goes and visits now sell out like before tickets to the convention sell out, just because like his special tickets, they'll buy those first because if people can't get in to see Doug, they don't want to go to the convention. And he was somebody that we were able to get on because someone else opened the door for it. We had them on and they responded to something, and now that's kind of the way that was in. So much of getting good guests is creating a great experience for the guests that you've already had on.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I mean, that's our two things is, again, like we covered the intro email, and then at the end, once we've had a fun time with them. Because you don't ever want to, I mean, it depends on what show you want to run, but if you want to be confrontational, that's a pretty short-lived
oh, yeah, for sure.
But if you're not doing that, if you want to get return guests and get referrals, the best way to do it is to have fun with them and then ask them at the end, hey, if you had fun, is there anyone you refer over? And we've gotten referrals every single time.
Yeah, and so the Hoof GP was another one. So if you don't know who the Hoof GP is, he's a guy that's on YouTube. He's got a 1 million plus subscribers, and the guy cleans cow hoofs, which seems like the most innocuous, ridiculous thing ever.
If you're into the Dr. Pimple Popper
but
or any of
that's
that
it,
stuff,
right?
it's
So the
same
videos that he
vein.
posts, he's taking a grinder and he's cleaning a cow hoof, and then he'll come across an abscess. And like one of our favorite videos, the cow hoof moves, and it pops this giant cyst that's on the cow's thing, and it covers his assistant in pus. And the guy just starts retching.
Should we have done a trigger warning for that?
Yeah, maybe. Post trigger warning. If you've been triggered by this, we're sorry. Rewind 15 seconds and then skip ahead.
I'm very remorsefulness.
So, but he opened up a door to a bunch of other YouTubers for us because he had a great time on the show. Because he was telling us that story, which was one that didn't make it to air. He told us about a book that he's currently writing, as well as got us hooked up with a few other content creators from Scotland that are 500,000 plus subscribers that are now, coming on the show and moving. The last thing that I want to talk about, we're running out of time here, to ask you is, who do you think is the most interesting guest that we've had on the show? Not your favorite.
Can you sing a song while I'm
Because your favorite guest that we've had on the show is Leanne Morgan, only so that you can ask other people if they've been called yummy by Leanne Morgan, which is the weirdest thing that you
was
do.
amazing. I don't know, man. Tom Leopold was great.
Tom Leopold, writer for Cheers and Seinfeld.
Baker Gant, the $18 million bank robber that did it all by himself. Right. Was pretty awesome. Yeah. I probably got to go to Leanne Morgan because that was our first one. That was I can't believe we were having her on. Yeah. Leanne Morgan. I think so. What about you? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pick two. I'm going to pick a funny one and I'm going to pick a serious one because I know what your serious one is. Who's my serious one? Mike Reiner. So Mike Reiner would actually be my funny one. Oh. Right? So Mike Reiner was because we make him do ridiculous things. For those who don't know, Mike Reiner is a legendary radio... Yeah, the old gray wolf. Yeah, so he's become a friend of the show, and one of the things that we have Mike on, or that we do whenever... Yeah, exactly, Mike off. But one of the things that we do with Mike whenever he comes on the show is that we make him read things... Now that he's doing audiobooks. Like he's never read any of the Lord of the Rings books. He's never read anything from the Hobbit series. We have a whole segment that he says, well, and then Smaug flies into the air with his black wings. We make him read nerdy stuff. But and the next time he comes on the show, we've got some spots from Star Wars keyed up for him to read because he hates Star Wars. He was old whenever it came out. He hated it then because he didn't get Star Wars and Corby, man. Yeah, he didn't get into to that kind of stuff growing up. And when he had to watch it whenever he was older, the only person he liked was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so we've got some Obi-Wan Kenobi lines that he's going to read.
and we just catch him off guard, but he loves it. The other person is...
I just want these aren't the droids you're looking for.
That's exactly it. That's the soundbite that we need.
That's going to be my text alert.
We can make that happen. The other one is a guest that we've got coming up called, her name's Lily Wood.
Oh, yeah.
Lily Wood.
NPE.
Yeah, so if you don't know about this is a fascinating sort of new phenomenon that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's people that are referred to as NPE, which means not parent expected. So with Ancestry.com and 23andMe tests, a lot of people are finding out that their moms or their dads aren't really their biological parents.
And I asked her, is it typically the dad? Because that's the easier one, too.
Yeah, right, like that.
That's the easier situation.
Well, do you remember the movie Mafia, where Christina Applegate comes up to her ex-husband at the end, and she's like, "Why didn't you tell me we had a son?" Like, it's just this ridiculous
yes, that's
thing.
what I'm talking about.
Right, yeah, like that doesn't happen.
Right.
But yeah, it's typically that. And so she tells her story. We had a friend who went through this, right? The guy she thought was her dad her entire life. Turns out she did a 23andMe test, gets the results
her mom
back.
liked to have fun.
Yeah, but she gets the results back, and it's not this guy. It's somebody else. It's a guy in Ohio, somebody she's never met before, doesn't know. And so even though she's, getting close to her 40s, she's got kids of her own, there's this weird crisis of identity. Lily Wood talks to people that have this exact same thing day in and day out. She tells her own story, and I think that those are the ones that right now she is, from a serious guest perspective, one of my favorites, because that's something that I do not know how to relate to those people. I don't know how to empathize with somebody that has had that kind of experience, but it's fascinating to me now to know somebody that's like that and realize that there's hundreds of people that are out there that are experiencing this same
there always
thing.
were. It's not the invention. It's becoming mainstream.
Yeah.
The 23andMe, the
Right,
Ancestry.com,
and
that we're all
Ancestry.com.
checking now.
Yeah.
So it's almost like mistakes that were made. I shouldn't say mistakes, but infidelities or
whatever it was,
just
right?
a one night 20 years ago is now coming to light.
And all of this stuff has become really, really impactful for the people who have been through that, to hear that they're not alone.
Yep.
And with Lily's interview in particular, she's so not just empathetic, but she wants people to know what her story was and that there's a place where they can go and share it and that they're not alone. And those, to me, are the coolest shows that we do. I love everything that we do with the guys on Tatooine Sons, because they're a ton of fun. I love all of the comedians.
Those are my favorites.
Yeah, with Ricky, the Talk Nerdy to Me podcast that him and Mike Schilling do together. Those guys are great. Ashley with Fangirling Over Jesus, she's awesome to have on. All of the writers and the amazing people. But it's those ones that talk about the heart of the human condition, where we can talk to another podcaster who's doing something outside of our little nerdy niche, and then allow them an opportunity to share their story and to get others, because those are the things that really, as we go through life, are the most inspiring, and also where the best material comes from whenever we're writing and using it with the music that we write or the stories and things that we're telling other people. It's really cool. And that brings us to the very last thing in the last 3 minutes that we've got is everybody says when you start a podcast that you have to pick a niche.
I heard that 900 times a day.
Yeah, and we've been told by so many people, if you were to hone in on one thing, that you guys are fun enough, your rapport is great enough, that you could grow to have 10 times the following of what you got in the same amount of time if you would just pick a niche and stick with it. And anytime we looked at some of that stuff, it wasn't fun for us. And so we feel like we've got the most niche podcast ever,
We're
because
the
we
nichiest.
because we just make it for the two of us.
Yeah.
If we think that it's fun, if we think that it's exciting, then we do it. And I would encourage you that if it's cool, if you think that it's cool, go after it. Don't let anything embarrass you or keep you from sharing what your little corner of the world is. If you want to start a podcast, go for it, do it. Guests are easy to get. People love to be on the shows. Come up with good questions, make it a fun experience for everybody. And as long as it's fun for you, the audience is they're gonna get onto that, and they're gonna love it and want to be part of it. So thanks, big thanks to Dallas Fan Expo for having us out, to Chuck and Shauna for running the boards and for keeping everything going. They've got another couple of long days ahead of them, for the Dallas Fan Expo at the K. Bailey Hutchinson Dallas Convention Center. And another big thanks to Ashley Cox for gearing us up with our all-day cosplay gear.
Got our fan gear.
Thanks for watching / listening to the
Thanks.
Reverend and the Reprobate. You guys have good, give, and we'll see you next time.